Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining me today, we've got Michael McCubbin and Patrick Van Straten. Welcome aboard, boys, and we are discussing Juventus because @Folds Ashley asked, how will Pirlo do at Juventus? And do you think it was right to sack Sarri after the comments made by Arrigo Sacchi? And we've got a second question as well from Clearly Claro, which is, can we consider the Juve project a failure? They've lost the last two Coppa Italias, sacked their manager, and sacrificed the age of their squad for a Champions League that even Ronaldo wasn't able to deliver. So two massive questions, big topic. But before we dive into it, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Eurofootball Daily and hit that notification bell to never miss a Continental Club. And also, please go check out Football Daily Podcast. We upload every single week on a Wednesday, and the channel's actually started really well, thanks to the hard work of Pat and Mike Atkins in particular. So go and show it some love. But yes, we have to talk about Juventus, because following their Champions League last 16 exit at the hands of Lyon last Friday, manager Maurizio Sarri was sacked after just a year in charge, despite guiding the club to a 9th consecutive Serie A title. That meant he had the shortest spell as Juve boss since Luigi Del Neri, who led the Bianconeri to 7th in 2010-11. It also marks the second time in consecutive years he's been sacked after one season in charge of a club, and it does leave question marks over where he'll end up in the future, with his reputation not quite in tatters, but certainly having taken quite a dent this year, despite this being one of the only years in which he's actually won silverware. Of course, hadn't really won, I don't think he'd won a trophy before his spell at Chelsea. And according to Chief Football Officer Fabio Paratici, the decision has been made weeks before, despite Chairman Andrea Agnelli saying he would have a think after the Lyon defeat. So it seems like the Juve hierarchy were on slightly different wavelengths about this sacking. In terms of his replacement, it's Andrea Pirlo, as I'm sure you've heard by now, who is instated as manager just 9 days after being hired as the coach of the club's under-23 outfit, which probably seemed like quite a sensible place to place him, considering he has no managerial experience. And the names that they were linked with as well, Simone Inzaghi, who obviously did a superb job at Lazio, or has done a superb job at Lazio, and Maurizio Pochettino out of work, was apparently the preference of Paratici. Agnelli's first choice was Zinedine Zidane. But when he wasn't available, he made the call to hire Pirlo. And meanwhile, the sacking of Sarri, has been heavily criticised by Arrigo Sacchi. He branded Sarri's tenure mission impossible, alluding to an ageing squad and trying to bring in a new style of play. So there's obviously quite a lot to dive into right now, but the first thing we want to ask is, did Sarri deserve the sack? Pat, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, well, in a way, I think this is a little bit of a complicated question, because I think when you're asking if someone deserves a sack, you're also asking whether there's somebody who is better placed to take the club to success. And obviously, McCubbin's going to talk a little bit about that, but I have my doubts. It was a disappointing season, and I guess the issue is like the manner in which Juventus achieve what they achieve, because losing the Coppa Italia final on penalties is not that bad. But the way that they closed out the season, I think just the Juventus hierarchy kind of felt embarrassed by it. Obviously the defence got worse this season, but I don't really think you can lay too much of that at Sarri's door. It had actually been getting worse for the last couple of seasons. And then this year, obviously, Chiellini got injured. He was out for the whole campaign, so they conceded 43 goals, which was 13 more than they allowed last year, which was the most they'd conceded at the time since 2011. So, I mean, it's a significant step down defensively, but I do think there are extenuating circumstances there. On the other hand, they ended up with 83 points, which is their lowest points tally in this 9-year title-winning streak. 83 points is pretty mediocre for a title-winning side, to be honest. I think that's what Leicester got when they won the league in the Premier in 2015-16, and that was fairly low. So, I mean, I just think that over the last few weeks of the season, it felt like divisions in the squad were starting to be visible on the pitch. You know, they lost so many. They lost 4 of their final 8 games. You know, they got beaten 4-2 by Milan. Yes, Milan were in good form, but they also lost 2-0 to Cagliari. Then they played a rotated side for the last game of the season, which they lost again to Roma, in order that they could have a strong side for the Champions League. And then they went out to Lyon. So, I mean, it was just kind of, one bad thing after another. And I think what Sarri doesn't have is that ex-player status or that lovability which can kind of get you over those hurdles. I think that teams just thinking, let's just get an ex-player is kind of stupid, unless there's actually a good candidate, and a lot of the time there isn't. But in one sense, it is helpful, which is when things go wrong, there is a baked-in affection between the fans and the manager, which can kind of guide you through crises. If the fans really love the manager, and it's assumed that the manager knows the club, then you can kind of get past these things. And Sarri just doesn't have that at Juventus. He was trying to institute a huge stylistic change at a time of massive squad turnover, with a team that didn't really feel like they were ready for it or that interested in it. And that, in that sense, I think that Arrigo Sacchi is completely right. It was almost an impossible job for him. But the irony is that if Pirlo comes in and tries to do a similar thing, he'll probably get a lot more tolerance, a lot more leeway. I think their attack got a little bit better this season. That's good overall. I think they produced something like 10 more expected goals over the course of the campaign, which is, no small amount. And I think as well that if Pirlo does want to bring in a kind of possession-orientated style, attacking style, who knows? But if he does, then he will benefit from Sarri having had this year, in the same way that I think Frank Lampard has benefited at Chelsea from a year of Sarri too. Just having those kind of passing links established in the side, having particular patterns of play baked in. I think that that's really, really helpful. But there's a broader issue as well, which is how they construct a squad. The squad is very old. There is a lot of dead weight. I think they spent 140 million last summer, bringing in De Ligt, Demiral, Danilo, Ramsey and Rabiot on frees. They also brought in Christian Romero and Luca Pellegrini, who went back out on loan. And of those, only Rabiot and De Ligt were among the 11 most used players in the squad, which just shows that there's a difference between signing someone on a free because they actually represent a good opportunity, and signing someone on a free in a kind of FIFA way, we'll sign him on a free and we'll sell him for 10 mil next summer, which it feels a little bit like what they did with Ramsey, and now they're paying the price for it. So I look at them and I just think this is a bloated, aging squad that needs to be completely gutted, and probably where you need to get rid of a few bad apples, because at the moment, with Sarri, when Andrea Barzagli said in March, right, I'm leaving, because I couldn't really work with Sarri, and when you hear these rumours about Chiellini and Ronaldo struggling with Sarri as well, everyone's reaction is, the problem's Sarri. Those we're on those guys' side. Whereas, actually, Sarri might have been right about what he was trying to get them to do. We'll never know. But when it's Pirlo having those disagreements with players, I think people will say, well, it's Pirlo, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like, bloated squad is quite important, but then I think there is a narrative around Sarri where everyone was kind of keen to quite quickly sort of rule him out long term at Juve. They never really looked that comfortable with his style of play. He made some quite good calls at certain points of the season. I think Juan Cuadrado at right back played well for long stretches despite an injury crisis there. I think he got more out of Dybala than Allegri had in his final season in charge. Pushed him closer to Ronaldo, and Ronaldo had a fantastic season goal scoring wise at least. But I think too many average players got too many games. I think Higuain, De Sciglio, Danilo, these are players that I wouldn't want starting regularly for a side who are not just going for a league title, trying to dominate the league, which didn't happen this year as it has in years gone past. But McCubs, let's look to the future now, because Andrea Pirlo, a surprise appointment to say the least.
Yeah, a baffling appointment on the face of it. Obviously, he has zero managerial experience since retiring in 2017. He hasn't even completed his coaching badges, which is pretty mad. But there's also reasons to think that, obviously Pat alluded to the fact that he does have that kind of ex-player status. He's obviously loved at the club. He's also a pretty good value option, according to Gazzetta dello Sport. He's earning, or he will earn, £1.3 million a year as manager, which is I think only 3 squad members earn less than that. And I mean, he may well get more as manager. That might have been maybe what he was going to earn as under 23s coach. But even if he does get a pay rise, I can't imagine it will be that much more, and especially not on the level of what they had to pay out for Sarri's sacking, which I think was about around 20 million euros. And obviously, Pochettino or Inzaghi would have commanded a much bigger wage as well. And Yeli also apparently prioritised enthusiasm and appeal in picking the appointment, which I think probably goes some way to kind of explaining why he wanted Zidane as manager. Clearly that was never going to happen, but Zidane obviously has that legendary status. He obviously played at Juve as well in the 90s, and has that track record of being able to deal with star players. Obviously him and Ronaldo had an amazing relationship at Real, for example, and obviously Champions League as well. I mean, if you're going to go for anyone who looks like they could deliver you a Champions League, Zidane definitely has the best track record in recent years, doesn't he? And this appointment follows in a similar vein to that of Zidane, as well as Lampard and Solskjaer in the Prem. Obviously, it's a lot riskier given he has total lack of experience, but he does carry that gravitas that I think even Poch or Inzaghi, who are incredibly well-respected managers, they may have lacked a little bit in the dressing room just because of that lack of silverware. I know it's quite a superficial thing, but when you're dealing with someone like Ronaldo, that could become a sticking point, especially if you're, say, on a run of 5 winless games or whatever. Like Pat was alluding to, in kind of moments of crises, like a player like Pirlo who doesn't have a track record, so doesn't really have, hasn't even had the chance to win silverware, but won so much silverware as a player, and was so universally respected as a player. He could kind of get through that, or at least he could build that kind of connection with a player, say like Ronaldo, who, say, Pochettino may have struggled a little bit more with, because they're a lot more about the collective. So I think with Pirlo, obviously it's difficult to know what kind of style of play he wants to introduce. I think almost, I don't know, if I was him, I'd maybe take a relatively pragmatic approach and maybe not go so hard on a particular style of play, because you do still have a good squad there. It is an old squad, but you do have the free, there is the scope of being able to just tell Ronaldo and Dybala, just go out there and play your game. Like that, they don't need that much coaching. And the area that does probably need a lot of coaching and was particularly weak this year was in the midfield. And I don't know, at least out of any player with no managerial experience to coach a midfield, I would probably back Pirlo. Like, I mean, him and Xabi Alonso, you'd probably look at and be like, yeah, they could probably do a decent job with no coaching badges of getting a midfield to operate properly, because they kind of did that as players. Like Pirlo, effectively kind of got the best out of like a player like Paul Pogba, a player like Arturo Vidal, Marquisio, just from being there. They were kind of orchestrating those players in game. So I think that could be a potential positive. And obviously, his legendary status in general. He was that driving force behind the re-emergence of Juve in the early 2010s. He won the Serie A Football of the Year 3 times consecutively between 2012 and 2014. I think only Ibra has won it 3 times since its inception in the late 90s. And so, I mean, I guess he might get a little bit of a free pass in that sense. He's also been on record saying that he doesn't really feel pressure. I think there's a kind of funny anecdote about how on the day of the 2006 World Cup final, he just was sleeping and playing FIFA, I think. But he's also said previously that he doesn't want to go into coaching. So there's a little bit of a it's really difficult. It's a massive risk. We have no idea really what he's going to be capable of. But at least, I don't know, from a Juve standpoint, it's the circumstances we're in at the moment. Obviously, Italian football has been particularly hard hit by COVID. He's a cheap appointment. it may well open the gates for Inter Milan or even Atalanta to take the title next season if it doesn't go well. But if it doesn't go well, either Pirlo will. Pirlo doesn't necessarily have the pressure that, say, Pochettino or Inzaghi would have. He certainly doesn't. Yeah, he certainly doesn't have the kind of financial implications that they would have. And Pep Guardiola could be available next summer, depending on what happens at Man City over the next 12 months, because obviously his contract runs out in 2021, and it's kind of well known that Pep has kind of been Juve's long-term target. So yeah, this could be quite a convenient stopgap for Juve. Obviously they want that 10th title in a row, but it might just be too expensive to have got in one of those bigger managers right now. And at least if it goes wrong with Pirlo, they won't have to kind of bite the bullet as much. But obviously he has a big job to do. We've already kind of touched upon it, but apparently he's already set on moving on Ramsey. Obviously he has those huge wages, has had a really disappointing season. I think only 11 starts in Serie A. His underlying numbers have looked all right, but generally, his end product hasn't been amazing. And yeah, they've got a number of aging stars on big wages. I think their squad is the joint second oldest in Serie A, which I think goes some way to explain maybe why Sarri's methods didn't really rub off on them. I think it's harder with a much older squad for them to take on kind of new ideas, or at least say at a club like Atalanta, where the squad is definitely not young, but they have completely taken on Gasperini's ideas. You kind of have that element of a lot of kind of underdog players who haven't had success in their career before, whereas at Juve you've got a lot of stars who think they know better in a lot of ways. But like, for example, De Sciglio's on €3 million a year. He's still contracted till 2022. Bernardeschi, €4 million a year. Douglas Costa, €6.5 million. Rugani, €3.5 million. And then you've got like Higuain, who's on massive wages, probably going to be offloaded this summer if they can. Khedira as well on similar kind of wages, 7.5 million euros. Blaise Matuidi's already off, probably to Inter Miami, isn't he? And there's also reports that Juve are actually quite keen to move on Ronaldo, which would be a massive blow to Pirlo. But in the long term, maybe something they need to do. Apparently it's more coming from the Juve end rather than Ronaldo's end. These kind of links to PSG. But yeah, that's a lot of that's conjecture as well, as is what we can expect from Pirlo. One thing's for certain, he definitely needs to keep hold of Dybala. I expect he probably will. I think out of any players, I think obviously he would command a big fee, but I think the loss of Dybala would just be too much for Juve right now, especially when we've not really seen any strong links in terms of who they want to get in this summer. And I guess with the new manager coming in so soon, I guess that's understandable, but I feel like there's been a particular lack of kind of transfer links with Juve. So yeah, I don't know, to sum up, it's just, we really don't know what Pirlo's going to be like, but at least it is a relatively inexpensive gamble for Juve. I think that's the one positive I can take from it. And yeah, like, as much as it could be an absolute disaster, it could be really, really good. As we've seen with some of the riskier managerial appointments in the last few years, they're not always totally bad. They could be a lot better, but they haven't been the kind of disasters that we perhaps thought that we would have seen.
Absolutely, yeah. We are really diving into the unknown, and I think maybe Juventus have just considered, the squad is clearly in a transition. It's a year until Matuidi and Higuain's contracts run out. If they can't manage to get rid of them this summer, there's, as McCubbin said, players on massive wages that need to be offloaded to free up funds, because their funds really aren't in a particularly promising position, hence why they had to construct that Pjanic and Arta swap deal, which was really just a deal for the books. But the Ramsey issue is quite an interesting one, I think. I dived into his stats a little bit this morning, and it seems like, while his numbers are all sort of quite regular, he's just lost a bit of confidence and particularly freedom to make those runs that he's so sort of notorious for, or was in the Premier League. He's really not having as much impact in the final third as usual. He's only completed 5 passes into the penalty area all season, which I found completely baffling. And his pressures per game have dropped from about 26 to about 19, which is quite a dramatic drop-off. Although that might be more to do with Sarri's system, how he likes to press the ball or keep his players, his midfielders particularly, in set positions on the pitch until certain moments, until certain trigger moments. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Ramsey. But yeah, that £400,000 per week contract that the BBC reported last summer has not been money well spent as of yet for Juventus. I mean, Pat, if you had to get your crystal ball out even, Atalanta we saw last night, and we've seen all season how dangerous they can be. Inter Milan look like they've got something special going under Conte if they can keep him at the club. Next season in Serie A, could we see a new winner with this Pirlo appointment coming in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that it's actually quite hard to see how Juventus are going to get massively better without good acquisitions this summer. Like, you can definitely improve the midfield balance. Like, McCubbin's totally right that Pirlo might be able to sort that out. They've got Arthur coming in. That doesn't particularly, excite me. I don't think it's like a game-changing signing or anything. On the other hand, De Ligt might be a lot better. That can make the difference. But yeah, I mean, Ronaldo be another year older. Higuain will probably be less useful. That's assuming that they don't move him on, because I kind of think they're going to struggle to do that. I don't know, really. Like, it just feels like without a significant signing, I struggle to see how they're going to get a lot better, because they weren't great in the final season under Allegri either. They've got kind of lucky the last couple of years to win the title, I think. So I would not be surprised at all, especially when you look into bringing in someone like Hakimi. Like, that is potentially a game-changing signing for Inter. Atalanta, kind of every year, I think, they're overperforming, and they always just buy guys for like kind of 8 or 10 mil, and somehow, it works. But I wouldn't be surprised if Inter won the title next season. I wouldn't even be surprised if Milan were pushing up there, because I just think Juve have got a lot of work to do over the next couple of seasons. And when you build a squad whose average age is 28 plus, then at some point your players are going to go. And we kind of think, oh, well, Chiellini might be back. Chiellini's 35. Like, Bonucci's well into his 30s. Ronaldo's into his 30s. They were still using Matuidi quite a bit, and he's obviously gone. I don't know. I think that this is actually... I would rather have taken over Man United post-Mourinho than take over Juventus now. Like, I think that it's quite difficult to look at this squad and find reasons to be that excited beyond people like Kulusevski coming in.
Especially with their gambles in the last few years on the likes of Bernardeschi. Rabiot hasn't really come off as of yet. Like, they have made an effort to lower that age, but those gambles, those picking of the best talents in Italy hasn't really gone to plan for them. So yeah, big question marks over Juve for next season. But yeah, we've got some more sympathy with Sarri than possibly we did last weekend as it's digested. But Pirlo, massive questions. But Juve fans, we want to know from you. How are you feeling about this appointment, and what do you predict happening next season? Get your thoughts in the comments down below, and let's move on to our big match preview. For our big match preview, of course, we are talking about the Champions League. We filmed this on Thursday, so we don't know the result of Leipzig Atleti, which obviously takes place on our tonight. But obviously Barcelona Bayern Munich for you guys is kicking off in a few hours' time. But we are previewing the game on Saturday between Man City and Lyon, because that will have a longer lifespan for people over the weekend. But yeah, McCubs, let's kick off with Man City, because they really are in the sort of, their moment of the season. They've played so well in the Champions League this year.
Yeah, it really is their moment of the season. I mean, obviously, into the quarterfinals, very convincing win over Real Madrid in the second leg, wasn't it? As it turned out to be back in March at the Bernabeu as well, and obviously coupled with their victory in the kind of FFP fiasco. I guess the feeling's pretty good around the Etihad at the moment. They've already got 2 players in this summer as well, so feeling pretty positive about next season. But yeah, I mean, looking at that Real Madrid game last week, I even had my doubts a little bit, just because although Man City had ended the season so strongly, they had looked pretty bad in any game in which they were playing a kind of tactically astute, decent side. Obviously lost to Arsenal in the FA Cup, had lost to Southampton and Chelsea in the league. I think I'm missing out another loss somewhere in there as well, but I can't quite remember. But they just looked so much better than Real, didn't they? 55% possession. They had 20 shots to Real's 9, 7 on target to their 4. Across the two legs, XG read 4.3 to 2.3 in their favour. So basically the aggregate score basically completely reflected the balance of play. Obviously, Real Madrid were missing Sergio Ramos, and that turned out to be a huge miss. Rafael Varane obviously at fault for both of those goals. And this was actually the first time in over 10 years that an English team had won both legs against a Spanish side in the knockout phase. I don't know if viewers will remember Liverpool beating them 5-0 on aggregate, beating Real Madrid, that is, 5-0 on aggregate back in 2009. And a lot of their players are coming into form at the right time as well. Gabi Jesus obviously had a really strong end to the season in the Premier League and was magnificent against Real Madrid, just as he was in the first leg. Won 8 aerial duels, 1 tackle and 1 interception, 1 key pass, 4 shots. Obviously got the all-important goal in the second half as well. He's now got 6 goals and 3 assists in 7 UCL games this season. That's a goal contribution every 55 minutes. And he's also just the second player to score in both legs of a UCL tie against Real after Van Nistelrooy back in 2003. But also Gundogan, really, really good in that second leg. 95% pass accuracy, 3 tackles and interceptions, 4 key passes. Kevin De Bruyne as well. Obviously, he's been magnificent all season, hasn't he? 2 tackles, 1 aerial duel, 3 shots, 9 key passes, which is just ludicrous against a team of Real's quality. So yeah, they've really set their stall out. It's, obviously we were talking up them and Bayern Munich as the 2 strongest teams kind of going into this final stage, and both of them have shown that they really are. Obviously they're both on the same side of the draw, so you'd maybe back PSG to get to the final, or let's see, depending on what happens tonight. Obviously you guys will all know at home what's happened tonight to make the final, but yeah, on this side of the draw, I think are the 2 favourites, aren't they? The one negative for City, I guess, is that they've lost 11 games in all competitions this season. Obviously this is not something they've been used to under Pep Guardiola, at least since 2017. That's compared to 6 in 18-19. So maybe there's scope for an upset, but I don't know. City's form at the end of the season was so good, and yeah, Lyon caused that upset against Juve, but as we've discussed, Juve ended the Serie A season in really bad form, and Lyon have only played 2 games since played 1 game since March. So 2 games including the Coupe de la Ligue. So yeah, played 2 games since March. So yeah, I really can't see this being anything other than a pretty comfortable Man City victory.
Yeah, I think it will certainly be difficult for Lyon. I'm just really pleased for Gabi Jesus as well, because he's come in for quite a lot of criticism from City fans over the last couple of years about his lack of sort of clinical edge in the box. I mean, everyone appreciates his build-up play and the way he can run the channels, etc. But he's now really stepped up as a goal scorer in Aguero's absence. I think Aguero, they always talk about who's going to replace Aguero. I think you've got one there, really, and just bring in another striker in a year's time, and you're pretty sorted. But Gabi Jesus looked excellent against Real Madrid. But Pat, let's move on to Lyon, because obviously they lost against Juventus but went through on away goals. But can you see much hope for them here?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think that they deserve to go through against Juventus. The expected goals were in favour of Juve, but Juve were 2 goals down on aggregate under 10 minutes into this second leg, and they were at home, and they didn't really produce that much. One of their goals was even more of a bull penalty than Lyon's, in my opinion. And they just seemed totally incapable of stepping it up a gear. And I guess part of the credit for that has to go to Lyon's midfield. Aouar was amazing at dribbling through pressure. I think he and Maxence Caqueret, who's a 20-year-old, I think it was his first start in Europe. In fact, I think it was his first appearance in Europe. He and Aouar completed 10 dribbles between them. Just were able to get out of pressure whenever they needed to. I don't think that'll be as easy against Man City. And Memphis Depay got that penalty, but other than that, he didn't have any shots in the game. He didn't create any chances. He didn't complete any dribbles, and he is clearly still finding his feet post-injury. And they would need him to have a big game, because whenever people talk about the history of this fixture, they say, oh, well, Lyon were pretty good against Man City a couple of years ago. As I recall, in their fixtures against City then, it was pretty... I mean, Depay was great, and then it was Ndombele and Fekir who were the difference makers. You know, Ndombele's ability to burst through the midfield really helped Lyon out in those matches, and Fekir was so dangerous playing off the last man. I just don't think that they've got that threat this time. Moussa Dembele, his goal numbers look good this season, but he had a lot of penalties, and I don't think he's actually been that great. It's been a significant step down on the year before. Cornet is not in the form that he was in 1 or 2 years ago. Bertrand Traore looks like they're going to move him on. You know, like there are all these guys who a couple of years ago looked like they were stars or on the verge of being stars or potential future stars, and now it's a bit of a middling team. So I find it extremely hard to imagine Lyon creating an upset here, because the thing is, if you score against Man City, they can just go up a gear. You know, it's not like Atleti or something, where Atleti are like, well, we kind of, you know, our attack isn't amazing, so if a team scores 1 or 2 against us, we're kind of in trouble. Like, if you score 2 goals against Man City, you're still never safe, because they can just shut you down, they can take possession off you, they can pin you back, and they have the players to find space and score goals from basically nothing. So I don't know. Yes, Lyon will be really up for this fixture, but I think they failed to score in 9 of their 28 league games this season, which is a real indication of where they are as a club. And I think that they just don't have that superstar talent. Even Aouar, who is, you know, probably their most highly rated talent, has not had a spectacular campaign. And it's perfectly possible that one of their players just goes insane and it's a one-legged fixture, you know, so it is completely possible that, you know, Depay pops one in the top corner from 30 yards out and they're able to kind of ride their luck, but I find it really, really hard to imagine.
Yeah, no, it does feel like it's going to be an uphill task, especially if they play the 3-5-2 formation that they did against Juve, with Depay being one of those guys up front who's obviously working his way back to fitness, as Pat said. But I'm just excited to see Maxence Caqueret, because I only watched the final 5 minutes of their game against Juve, because I was so enjoying Man City's demolition of Real Madrid. But, you know, as Pat said, Lyon are actually unbeaten in their previous 2 meetings against Man City, beating them 2-1 away in September 2018, and then drawing with them 2-2 a couple of months later. They've also got a full squad available to Rudy Garcia, whereas Man City have a full squad, bar Aguero, of course, which we've already talked about. No new injuries to contend with as of Thursday at 11:44 a.m. in the morning, so that could change by Friday night, but we shall see. But guys, I want your score prediction for this game and a quick thought and score prediction for Barcelona Bayern Munich tonight. So Pat, what's your score prediction for this one first of all?
3-0 City.
Oh, okay. McCubbs, what are you thinking score prediction for this?
I was going to say 3-0. I'll say 3-1. 3-1.
Yeah,
quite hard.
I think it'll be a bit tighter. I'm gonna go 2-0 Man City. But yeah, it should be an entertaining game either way, but I can't really see Lyon getting a win. And then Pat, what are your thoughts on Barcelona Bayern?
That's a bit more difficult because, again, if the player who could just have a great game is Lionel Messi, then it's complicated. But I probably 3-1 Bayern.
3-1 Bayern. Okay, McCubbs, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it'll be tighter. I think Barcelona were better against Napoli than I expected. Obviously, Napoli are nowhere near the level of Bayern, but I think it'll be 2-1. I think it'll just be a little bit tighter just because it's a one-legger. I think over 2 legs, Bayern might have really taken Barcelona to town in a similar way that they did to Chelsea. But I think, just because there's that kind of one-leg element, I think it'll be 2-1.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, Barcelona will be bolstered by the return of Vidal and Busquets from suspension, which should help out their midfield slightly. But yeah, I can only really seeing it go one way. I'm actually going to go 3-0 Bayern, to be honest. I think it'll be one-sided to say the least. But guys, get your score predictions in the comments down below, and let's quickly move on to our quickfire question. Our quickfire question comes in from @Swagato. He's back, and his handle is @Swagato is back. Welcome back into the fold of Football Daily, Swagato. Don't know where you are, but welcome back. Anyway, if you don't know who that is, where were you in 2017? Anyway, his question is, after the signing of David Silva, Can Lazio challenge for the title next season? I mean, McCubs, we've already discussed the sort of scene in Italy. Lazio obviously had quite a demoralising collapse towards the end of the year. Can David Silva make a bit of a difference there?
Yeah, he could definitely make a difference. I can't say I'm like an expert on what Lazio will look like with David Silva, because obviously Luis Alberto is their kind of main creator, wasn't he, over the last few years? So I don't know. I mean, I guess they could maybe integrate them both. In that case, I think he would make a big difference. I don't know whether that would be how they do it. So yeah. Whereas if he was just replacing him, I don't know how big an uptick they'd have. But I mean, I don't know. David Silva's still been, very productive in the City side, even at the age of 34. And obviously going to Serie A would suit him. I think for sure. I think he'll be able to get maybe a year or two more in his career than he would have in the Premier League. Having said that, obviously City, are designed by Pep Guardiola to get the best out of their creators and attackers. So yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily. He's not. I don't think he's the signing to suddenly turn you into title winners. To be honest, especially when you look at how significantly Inter are probably going to be improved going into the new season, especially now that Conte is going to be looks like he's pretty safe there. It looks like they've kind of come to a sort of truce, haven't they, over whatever kind of disagreements were existing at the club before. So now I would still back Inter and even maybe Atalanta over Lazio for next season probably.
Fair. Pat, what are your thoughts? Is this signing just a bit of fun, a nice swan song for Silva in Rome?
It's not a bit of fun. I mean, like, David Silva's still good enough to contribute, but I don't think it's going to change anything. I mean, this season, Lazio got, 13 penalties in the league? Immobile ended up with 36 goals, and they still didn't even finish in the top two, and that was in a season where the top two got very few points by Serie A standards. So I find it hard to imagine it really making a difference next year, unless they go out and strengthen in quite a lot of areas. I don't know. Can they challenge for the title? I guess they could probably do maybe what they did this year. Just kind of stay there in the pack until relatively late in the season. But I don't really see it. I think that they'll probably be competing for fourth with Roma and Milan.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like he'll make their attack better. I think he'll improve some of the players. I think Joaquin Correa could definitely learn from him. I think Ciro Immobile can look forward to some devilishly good through balls. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, if he's still there as well, but it doesn't really help with the average age of their side as well. Lucas Leiva, Cherby, Parolo, etc. So there's still work for Simone Inzaghi to do before they can be seen as a consistent challenger. But I'm personally really excited. I think it's a great move for him, to the right level of club for him, where he could make a big difference there. Maybe not, in terms of the table, but definitely in terms of the squad and just learning off such a fantastic player. And what a servant he's been to Man City too, as everyone has rightly said over the last couple of weeks. But guys, that is the end of Continental Club for this week. I hope you enjoyed our thoughts on Juventus and our Champions League predictions. Make sure you guys get your thoughts in the comments down below. And what should they go and do now, McCubs?
They should go and watch Transfer Review from yesterday. That was with us two, wasn't it? Go and watch Football Pyramid. Just go and watch all the stuff on Eurofootball Daily, really. Obviously, with the Champions League on at the moment, we've got quite a lot of kind of Champions League themed stuff out. So yeah, plenty to get your teeth stuck into.
Absolutely. And Pat, anything from the podcast?
Well, subscribe to the podcast on whichever podcast app you use, Extra Time.
Absolutely.
And of course, subscribe to Football Daily Podcast YouTube channel. We're now over 20,000 subs. Thank you very much to everybody who has subscribed already. If you want some longer form content that you can do without actually having to look at us, then I really recommend the podcast.
Absolutely. I think some of our best content goes on the podcast channel, so go and check it out. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.